welcome back to the Bible Recap discussion. I hope you guys still enjoying us. And then, of course, just want to remind you, let us know you're here by hitting the like button or putting your name in the comments section. And, of course, at the end, if you've got any questions, comments, whatnot, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
You can put those in the comments section as well.
Oh, yes. So you can be a part of the conversation for sure. So
Yeah, because if you put a question, we'll engage.
Yeah.
So
try to anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. My wife's pretty good about getting on there and let me know. So, but yeah, be a part of the conversation. If you have questions want us to clarify anything, I had my mom reach out to ask me to clarify something. So that was kind of cool. So, yeah, comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff like the YouTubers say. So, all right. Well, let's jump in it.
All right, so first question. Of course, we finished Job this week, and it was just last 3 chapters. And our first question is the only question that covers Job. It says, when God speaks, Job's tone and perspective shifts. What does God say or reveal to Job that leads to that shift in attitude?
God kind of just calls him out. It's sometimes we need that. And he gives him that ability to repent and to do right by God and apologize almost. Like, it's kind of what I got from it, to show that, we can be in the wrong and not everything. And kind of like what we talked about last week, things happen for a reason. God has a plan, follow the plan and move on. We don't need to hold it against God or hold our good deeds that should get us favor with him. We do our good deeds to be good people and to be images of God. We don't need those to build up credits with God. So I think that's kind of where my thought of that was going.
Mine too. I just said Job realized he did not compare.
Yeah.
And sometimes
That's
we
a
think
good way
we
of putting
do,
it, yeah.
But when it comes right down to it, we can't compare.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the focus of God's answer is not directly towards Job's question. And then, of course, sometimes it's like we want our question answered.
Yeah.
But, God's going to answer the true question, stuff that's lying down underneath. And that's why I appreciate God's answer. And the fact that right there at the end also, God then pivots to Job's friends and be like, by the way, you were wrong.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you.
You were way off.
Yeah, I love that part too.
Yeah. That helps too. Well, I think it also helped Job's mindset as well. I'm just trying to think of if, again, I've tried to put myself in Job's shoes throughout majority of this, and, getting reprimanded by God is the best kind of a way of putting it. I don't need that, I guess. But then getting the follow-up that at least what he was saying earlier was right, kind of tear you down, but let's build you back up type of situation. Like, what you were doing was right. What they were doing was not right. Let's get this fixed and move on. So, yeah. Job didn't start out great, the whole story, but it ended pretty well. Once we ended it, I felt way more better about it. Like, I didn't. Then when it started. I know we talked about that here before, but I did enjoy it now. It's one of those, like your movie, you hate it until the very end, and then, so.
It kind of finished again with that relationship that God and Job had, and I was looking for that.
Yeah.
It just kind of kept you in suspense until the very end that God was still there for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that humility that we do not see the full picture of what God's got going on in the background. Because there's times, we'll blame God for something where God's like, that's not what I had for you. But again, back to the whole justice part, and free will we talked about as well, to where all that stuff is going on. And so, to get mad at God or to expect something of God, the story reminds us that we have to sit back and just take a moment to maybe listen, reflect, and ask questions of ourselves. Am I actually seeing this the right way? But I know sometimes in those tough moments, even me, it's easy just to jump in them and be like, I want it my way, or I want answers, I want resolve. And And sometimes that's just
Not how it is.
how it is. Yeah. Or you have to wait, marinate on it for
Yeah. Let it marinate. That's a good show.
Number 2, in quotations there, Genesis 15, do all the promises of God's covenant with Abram sound easy and desirable?
I put not at all. That's all I wrote.
Far from it.
Just the getting there point
Oh, yeah.
doesn't sound desirable or easy or, I'd
Well,
say
they were
anything
slaves
else.
for 400 years, and it
Yeah.
just, yeah,
I
I can't imagine.
In my Jewish study Bible, it talked about that everything that happens to his descendants had also happened to him. So, like, he went down to Egypt, had some issues. There were some plagues that happened, and then he left. And of course, into the promised land. Of course, he doesn't own it. They eventually take ownership of it.
Yeah.
But the fact that this precedent in Abraham's life, and then the prophecy to say,
yeah.
you said we were going to get the land. You just should have asked earlier about how we were going to
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
But I think
How long
for
was it gonna
Abraham,
take?
oh yeah, 400 years of slavery within this whole timeline.
Yeah.
But for Abraham to be guaranteed descendants, I think would be something in his shoes would be very desirable for being as old as he is, and not having a kid yet. And so I could see how for him it's be very desirable and in a sense easy for his part, because one of the things we'll see in the early part of the patriarchs here is that they receive a piece of the promise, and their faith is basically knowing that God's going to achieve it down the road somewhere, and that they're not going to see the end result.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that I think I wish she would have highlighted a little bit more in her reflection, that the amount of faith to say, okay, I'm going to do my part here, knowing that I'm not going to receive the grand prize, the promised land, the ownership, and see all the descendants, but I'm going to do what I can, what God wants me to do now here, knowing that God's got something greater coming down the road for everybody.
Be a good example of being just a good person. And that's kind of what I've gotten through all of this is teaching us, if you're a good person, believe in God, do what's right, you will be rewarded. Not that we ask for rewards, but with that benefit.
So you're saying you think it was easy?
No,
him?
I think in the grand scheme of for Abraham to see what was be desirable, but also that the fulfillment of the full promise would not be easy. But it wasn't incumbent upon him to fulfill
I see.
it. And the fact that when it describes there in the covenant and the sacrifices, Abraham takes a nap, and God is the one who walks through and makes the commitment and takes on the consequences. Of course, gives us a little precursor, hint, teaser, trailer, whatever you want to call it, to Jesus making the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not saying that it's easy, but I'm saying for the patriarch's part, God's not asking them to do it all or to take on everything, but just to know that the whole route itself won't be easy, but their part, if they stick with God,
Would be.
it'll be easy in the sense of in the grand cosmic scheme of things.
Okay.
Though it would still be hard, because as we see throughout, I mean, Abraham throws his wife under the bus twice.
Yeah.
She freaks out, a couple of times.
Yeah.
So not saying, it's always easy, but as far as, what God's asking them to do, just trust him. But again, I think that's the part why God, in his mercy and grace for us being human beings, is as easy as it is, our humanity sometimes gets in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great way of putting it, honestly.
Any other thoughts on number 2?
No. You had a lot more.
You did a good job.
Yes. Ditto.
Yeah.
All right, number 3 then. How, if at all, has your understanding of angels been reshaped by what we've read in Genesis so far.
And I think it's ingrained in your head for so long that it's blonde hair, blue-eyed, white linen robes with these, angel wings. And then and this was a new part for me. I've always took it as, Angel Gabriel and all of that as, being but once she quoted all of this, is probably a better way to put it, that they were just, male humans that spoke the language, which would make total sense, that kind of just show up out of nowhere. And then when she kind of explained the giants piece of that, so would make sense why people are scared, because they are not too far off of the people that starts with an N.
Oh, the Nephilim?
Nephilim, yeah. Kind of like what we talked about in our last podcast series, that is still within a generation or two, probably more than that, within spoken time of giants and the Nephilim. So, that would be probably pretty scary. It'd be just like now we understand, giants and stuff like that from them. But, and then when she explained the creatures, I don't remember the names, but with the wings and
the seraphim and
the 6 and the 4 wings with eyes on them and foreheads, I was trying to quote what she was saying.
Check out Ezekiel if you want to check out the entire description.
Yeah. and I think that, I wonder if that just kind of throughout the years, and she mentioned in one of these kind of best way I can say is the whitewashing of Jesus and the Bible. I think that try to transcend by that into what we see today angels are. So I know that was a long ways to get.
No, you're good.
But I learned a lot from that, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say at the end of the day.
I think too, when I started going back through Genesis, how many times they talked about angels, because I didn't do my questions this time until the end. And then I thought, well, I don't know, where were the angels? So then I started rereading and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, they were here and they were here and they were here and they were here. So the one that kind of stuck out to me was when they were, the angel appeared to Hagar. And then she kind of related it to, was it possibly Jesus at that time? And I thought, well, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So that was reassuring to me too, that
Jesus just wasn't born, and that's who Jesus was.
Right.
And that's, I think, as Christians, sometimes we don't quite understand either that Jesus was there the whole time. God sent his son. His son wasn't just born. So Jesus was there and along that whole journey.
Well, John chapter 1 just reinforces that he was there in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so some of these things where it says the angel of the Lord, but it speaks in the first person of God. It is within the realm of possibility that could just been Jesus who showed up. Because we'll even see that again, because I've preached on several times from Joshua when he sees the head of the angel army, the head of the angelic army in front of Jericho. And some suggest that too is possibly Jesus showing up as well.
Wow. Yeah.
I just had never really thought of it that way until kind of dug into this more. So
she's super knowledgeable.
I've
been listening to the YouTube because I'm a visual and hearing learner, and so watching her talk, I can take it in 2 different ways, and the way she explains it through that, and her voice is very soothing too, so that helps, but makes it very easy. And but the way she just knows it, and that's reassuring, I guess, that we're reading something that someone believes in and took the time to do. If that makes sense. So
okay. See, number 4. How is circumcision a fitting symbol for God's people, the Israelites? How might that particular mark serve as a form of protection to keep them from sin?
I have no idea. That one was over my head, I guess. I read that question quite a bit, and I was kind of just, I guess I don't understand the significance of it. And it was while reading all of this. But yeah, so.
Well, our scholar over here is going
That's
to
what I was about
explain
to
it to us.
Professor,
But
I'd like to
I
learn.
took it as it was the marking of the Israelites for one, but I don't know how that's really necessarily protecting them from sin.
Well, in a sense, it
Unless
can be
you
a
go back
visual
to the-
reminder.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I go into my spiel, just to note that the ancient world has different understanding of things than we do in 21st century America. And so for them, in a sense, it could be a visual reminder for the male. So, okay, I'm covenanted with God.
I have the agreement.
And that there's this blessing that's going to come through the seed. And so you need to understand what's going on here in the very first commitment in chapter 15, when God first shows up to Abraham and says, I'm going to give you a son. Well, we know that he's already on the average older. I mean, 75 at that time. But then, of course, in his travels, he goes to Egypt, doesn't want to get killed. And so hands off Sarah over to Pharaoh. Well, Pharaoh takes her as his wife. And so what's happening? What's the danger? Right womb, wrong seed. And so I think then we have this further stretch of time, because God wants to make sure when he does act that it's his work, and it's definitely going to be a child from Sarah and Abraham. And so when Sarah, of course, gets, fidgety and restless, she then tries to force God's hand. And so then we have the right seed, but the wrong womb.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then, of course, then wait a little bit more time. And of course, they get to the age where both Abraham and Sarah laugh. And then, so Isaac's name actually translates as he laughs. And so when we get to right before Sodom and Gomorrah, chapter 18 and chapter 19, is that then they are both at such an age where it should be physically impossible. Sarah, I know in our Christian Bibles it says she, can no longer bear children. In the Hebrew, it's a little more graphic. She's not having periods anymore, so she's past menopause. And then to her response is, "Shall I not receive pleasure from my Lord?" Which means not only is her equipment not working, his equipment's not working either. And so then God shows up there and says, "In a year's time, you're going to have a son." They're both way too old to have a kid this time. But then God shows us, yes, you are going to have a child a year from now. And so talk about a miracle and a guarantee that this child that's going to come is the product of Sarah and Abraham. And so then we, of course, have the covenant here. And, of course, the command to circumcise happens right before the affirmation. So now when they see, that have the circumcision, they're reminded of the commitment that God made, what God has done. And of course, they're reminded, how intentional they should be in their relationships, their devotion to God, because he has fulfilled the promise, and he's promised even more descendants, more than the stars in the sky, and more than the sand on the beach.
He has the PhD, and we do not.
Take this off and drop it. Right?
Yes.
Wow.
But again, that's where I think she could have added a little some more into that. And the reflection is that how often for us do we get impatient with God, where we try to do things our way, or maybe there's a situation that scares us to where we might throw someone else under the bus, like Abraham does Sarah, and of course then Isaac does with Rebecca
Right.
later. And so I think we see here a journey of faith for a family to understand what's it mean to actually be a follower of this God, who they're working on this relationship. Of course, don't have all the roles yet, but to also understand that part of their faithfulness is connected to how God's going to fulfill this
The
promise.
promise.
I was saving all up for the end because actually that's connected to question 9.
All right.
And, you know,
Good.
you already know, Tyler. We're stumped on that one too.
Yeah.
So back to our question, is circumcision a fitting symbol? We wouldn't think about that, but I think in the ancient world, God is like, this is actually probably the perfect ritual to remind them of this covenant that is a guaranteeing of descendants. Go ahead. I've spoken a lot. Go ahead.
No, I'm asking a question.
Okay.
Do you think they had the circumcisions to keep themselves clean as well? Like, was that?
Well, she mentions it in the book that
Okay. Because that's
the practice of circumcision, even today,
is
it's
today.
noted there's a
Yeah.
health thing to it because
I must have missed
cleanliness
that
and stuff like that. I think part of that is the wisdom of God, knowing what He was doing.
part. Yes.
Because
Okay.
if you're clean and you're not having infections and whatnot, and things are working,
Yeah.
I would say successful pregnancies and of course then the successful
Descendants.
survival of the infant would be higher.
Okay. Because
So
that's what.
that's why I think wisdom of God.
Yeah. No, that is the answer I needed.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm just trying to think of-
and there's parts where, it's awkward to talk about circumcision.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of the understanding what's going on in the scripture because when Abraham has his servant put his hand under his thigh, it's not his thigh.
Yeah.
Awkward. But part of that is in that vow that, and it's awkwardly done, is that if the servant were to violate his commitment to fulfilling the task, he was basically saying, if I fail, if I don't fulfill my duty, may I be sterile and never have any more kids. Because again, the goal is descendants.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's a weird and first, today it's gross way to to
Yeah.
think about it, but in the ancient world for them that was normal because we'll see that again.
Okay.
If you've read the Old Testament, then you know what I'm talking about.
We'll get there, I'm sure.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Next question. Next question. Number 5. Abraham has a lengthy negotiation with God, where God willingly, and patiently listens to Abraham's pleas. In the end, what ultimately changes from God's original plan? What might this reveal about human perspectives and limitations?
I'll be honest. This one was blank too.
Well, I went back to where he was pleading with him. I'm not sure why I put that, but when he was pleading with him to save,
It's a lot.
yeah. Well, yes, because he said, you're going to destroy the whole town. Can't we find 50? And he kept going down from 50 to 40 to 30 to 20, and he was pleading with him for that. And to me, that was just showing that I thought God was giving Abraham the hope and grace to find a smaller number of good people before destroying, but it also showed human limitations.
I think
And recognizing that, that we didn't have that.
as I was reflecting on this, like obviously I looked at it, but I only write down if I have an actual answer. One thing that kept coming to me on the second question, though, is that a lot of times we can't look past the here and now. We're looking at
Right,
situations
so we
right
have
now.
those limitations.
Yeah, and
being
that's
able
what
to
our-
recognize that.
So we don't always look at what God's plan is. We look at what we think our plan is, being kind of selfish and thinking of what I want me and my immediate family or, me and my community want to move. That was one of the things that I kept hemming and hawing about. But really, it's our limitations are a lot of times our desires, I guess is the best way I could put it. So, but yeah, that first question, I kind of stumped me.
Well, I think for me, as I've read it over and over and over, is that what God's doing, he's testing Abraham to reveal his own character. Because we know, God is really concerned about other people, mercy. And so that's why he's willing to go down as far as Abraham's willing to ask. And so I think for God, what he's doing there with Abraham is for him to learn about the mercy and love of God, that he's not wanting innocent people to perish. Mm-hmm. And so, and of course we get into the rest of the story, and it's unfortunate, it's not 10, it's 4. Yeah. And so there's, still come up short, but again, he doesn't just write everyone off. The angels are basically sent there. Okay, Lot, get your wife, get your 2 daughters that are willing to go, and let's
come
go.
with us, yeah.
And so God then also provides a way out.
And that's what we've talked about, free will. They gave them the chance to leave, and then they chose not to, where I think that's where God has given us an amazing ability to do the right thing. I feel like a kind of a broken record. I think I say this every time, but it's just showing we have the ability to make decisions for ourselves. They can be good or bad or indifferent, but it does affect the plan at the end of the day.
And I think on top of it, as far as, God and Abraham are looking over the city, is that I think in many cases when we're angry or upset, we don't like a particular way people do things. We're willing to just wipe them all out or just throw them all together, even though there might, they might not all be of the same mind, and there might be some good people amongst the wicked and whatnot. And so I think it's a lesson for us to view and understand love and mercy and grace, to not just want to burn everything down when there's people who are worth saving.
For sure, everyone's worth saving. It's just if they're willing to do it.
And that's the thing, is it's the call and response, and it's up to them to respond.
I 100% agree with that. Obviously, I'm the free will guy.
And that was a lesson of James and John when they wanted to call down thunder on people. Like, they rejected us. Let's send them ablaze. Jesus was like, no. You're missing the point, fellas. Anyways.
For sure.
Number 6. And so you got this keyed up. So for our viewers, number 6 says, read 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 aloud. How could Lot be declared righteous? And of course, we've got a little more scandal going on too.
You guys ready?
Yep.
And if he has rescued Lot, a righteous man who is distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawlessness. Well, that's all of chapter 7 or verse 7 on mine. But
it's a short verse.
Yeah, let's say I remember reading. I must have kept reading because I was like, that doesn't. Not all of it, but yeah. All right, I'll read it again. And if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawlessness, or lawless, not lawlessness.
And mine, which is the really soft version.
Yeah.
But God saved Lot from those cities. Lot, a good man, was troubled because of the dirty lives of evil people. So.
Yeah. Well, and it seemed like in the scriptures that Sodom and Gomorrah had a reputation. I mean, people knew what was going on there, and the fact that Job put up with it for so long, they stayed there. I mean, to us would seem quite crazy. And so I think you're ready to say something. So
no,
okay.
I'm
you're
kind of just
ready to
listening. No,
But I think that gives us that. The passage from Peter helps us give us perspective, I think, on how God's viewing Job despite his shortcomings.
Yeah. Well, just like Sodom and Gomorrah still have relevance today. A lot of places are compared to Sodom and Gomorrah. That's even, I hate to say it, pop culture wise, like it's still relevant, and it still has that negative connotation with it that you don't want to be that. So definitely what you said, that's what kind of just hit me. I guess that's what I was going to say, but I was going to wait till you finish. So we're good. But yeah, it's.
for me, it's learning to, I don't have to spew everything out right away.
Hey, that's
What
what
you
we're
got?
here for. Yeah. Don will stop you if it's too much, right?
Now, I mean, how could Lot be declared righteous? I think it's because he recognized evil, and he was concerned.
And he saved the people we could save. Like that was, you can only do for what they're willing to, like what we just said, like you got to give them the chance. You did what we had to do. Let's move on forward. And they made their choice.
Well, and the thing is, culturally, Job was between a rock and a hard place. So, of course, the immorality, and of course, he offers up his 2 virgin daughters. You know, like, Job, why would you even consider that?
Yeah.
And of course, you know, she says, you know, he might know that the crowd would reject him, but of course, we don't know that from the text. But in the ancient world, hospitality and guarding your guests was of the highest expectation. So, in essence, he had to guard those 2 visitors at all costs.
Yeah.
Because that was part of the cultural expectation. And so, of course, then, you know, for the demand from the crowd, you know, they're violating a cultural norm or a cultural morality at that time. And so, so Job's got, okay, I either have to maintain hospitality or the integrity of my daughters. And, you know, he didn't have any good choice at all. And so I think that's where I can feel for Job, even though I think I would, you know, if I was in a situation, maybe I could find another way out.
Another decision.
But within the context of the culture, I could see Job. He was doing anything he could to try to be who he was culturally expected to be and what he was supposed to do.
And I think that gives us a good example of doing what is right, not what is culturally accepted. I think at the end of the day, sometimes that's, you know, don't always have to go with the flow. Sometimes you have to walk the separate path, as was it Robert Frost, like his poem, or you know, the 2 paths. I don't know it all, but it's always stuck with me. You don't always have to take the well done path. Sometimes you have to go the other route. So I think that's a good example for us of being a good person isn't always easy. So at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, and I think, you know, all this stuff, it makes it a good but also tough conversation to talk about Job being declared righteous, because then later, because the question that kind of begs that we need to bring up his relationship with his daughters after the fact.
Yeah.
Not good. But also for them, they say, you know, there's no guy, and so if they, you know, for them, if they think it's the end of the world, and that there's no husbands out there for them, I can appreciate the desperation, though I still wouldn't have condoned the action.
Yeah.
And the fact that Job let himself be, not Job, oh my goodness, I think I said Job earlier. Lot.
We understood.
Put himself in that situation to where it's like, why are you getting hammered around your kids anyway?
Yeah.
But again, that's the 21st century, you know, the understanding onto them, which they would have no concept.
Right. And I think she even talked about that somewhere in there, that there wasn't that concept.
Yeah. And there wasn't the explicit command not to have relations with family members, but
right.
In essence, I think some of those understandings would have existed at the time. But yes, there wasn't an explicit
Well, they definitely
command.
do now, and that's why it is hard for us to go, wowzers.
Yeah. Well, even just like, later we talk about, I even asked right before we started,
Esau.
yeah. Marrying his first cousin, like every time they would say that, like you just have that native connotation with it based off our cultural norms. But for, you know,
And Abraham and Sarah were half siblings.
that's what I was about to say. Like then you have, you know, very prominent people in the Bible are half siblings, but sometimes I also think there's always that conversation of like Noah, you know, all his sons and daughters, like they would have, you know, that's how it had to have happened. Like, you know, we can't just, you know,
which is probably why the command came later.
yeah,
It's like,
because that's what,
this is not preferable, but we need to populate the planet.
but yeah, but that's what, for sure.
One last thought I have on this.
No,
Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
Is that notice that all the deviations of the relationship. So Abraham and having Ishmael, and of course the Lot's daughters having their kids, they end up being adversaries to Israel down the road.
Yeah.
And what even Esau and his kids. I mean, all of them end up being adversaries to the promised line.
One of the things that I was meaning to write down and didn't is how they believe that Ismail is one of the descendants of one of his descendants is Muhammad. Mm-hmm. Like how that tree is connected. I've never put two and two together or never learned it. So that was a really big, like I even stopped the video and just thought about it for like 5 minutes, like how different we are, but yet we're coming from the same place. So it kind of makes sense why they were adversaries, because Ismail probably thought he should have gained all of this notoriety, but didn't, because he was culturally, like we said, as the oldest son, should have received everything his father had, and didn't get it. So no wonder there's so much animosity even today with the two religions. So
yeah.
And just look at Israel right now.
The prophecy being played out.
Yeah.
Now, here's one thing that I've thought about, and so I'm going to try to be careful with this. Is that one of the things we see in the promise is that through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the promise is descendants and land. Mm-hmm. When Ishmael, Hagar and Ishmael are cast out, it's the promise of descendants. And so one of the things we see today is a fight. Well, in history and up today, we see a fight with these nations with land. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if there's this
still playing out
unconscious thing that's going on, to where looking back, they felt maybe this essence feeling deprived or robbed of a gift of land. And so it's something I've always just thought about. Is like, and of course I can't say if that's 100% true or not, but it's just something, again, I've always thought about, wondering that I wonder if there's something underlying there, that there comes this obsession, because when a mosque gets built, it's considered conquered land. Mm-hmm. So again, I wonder with the connection and the differences in the promises that's being played out.
Yeah, because there's only been like 3 years, calendar years since forever, that recorded time that there has not been a war or a struggle for in the Middle East is where but 95% of it is over what we would call the Holy Land. Mm-hmm.
And what makes the Holy Land so unique, I've learned this in other places, is that by the time of when Israel's ready to take the Promised Land, 2 major highways run through that. And by major highways, I mean to connect the east, the west, the north, and the south. So whoever owns that piece of property had an unbelievable amount of influence, which would explain why Solomon became the richest man, because if everything's going through your land, and taxes, tariffs, whatever, trade, to be in, for God to say, okay, I'm going to put you right here, which, for us coming out of Kansas, we go over there and like, man, this is such a wasteland. When God's like, actually, this is the piece of land in all the world.
Yeah. And that's what I've always thought, why would someone fight over a desert? Mm-hmm. And as kids, that's what you're taught. And I understand that's not everything there. Why wouldn't they go to Europe or, go somewhere they're not persecuted, have their own spot? And then that's when I've kind of, here in the last couple of years, realized like there's historical significance, just like with me going back home, they're selling my grandparents. They're not selling the thought of my grandma selling her house. There's so many memories. There's so many everything. Like that's scary to me. So leaving, those little things like that, why I understand now why they would want that, or want that area.
One of the most fought over pieces of, probably the most fought over piece of land over there isn't
it Calvary Hill?
Megiddo. also known in other languages Ar Megiddo, where we get Armageddon. Anyways,
Okay.
so if nothing else, you're gonna learn a lot of Bible trivia when I talk.
I hope you get more than just that. But
Yeah, we'll
if
get more than
not-
that, but if nothing else,
at the end of this, we will have a trivia night. No, I'm just joking.
there will be a test. See, we're on number 7. Much is said of Abraham's faith in offering Isaac as a sacrifice. But given Isaac's age, he certainly knows what's happening because he says he's probably about
25 to 30.
Yeah.
25 to 30.
And that was mind blowing to me because everything is predicted as him as,
As
a
a
teenager
child,
or
yeah.
what I would consider, like 12 to 13 years old.
Me too. 10,
And
12.
but being 25 to 30 and as a 12-year-old, I would understand just listening to your parent or your guardian telling you, hey, do this, prepare this. Now put it upon yourself. Mm-hmm. As a 25-year-old, 30, he's obviously done this before.
Yeah.
Like he knows what's happening. And and Abraham being the age he was, at 25, 30 years old would have been definitely able to withstand himself, but the respect enough to listen and do that knowing you're about to be sacrificed had to be.
Yeah, because Abraham would have been 125, 130.
Yeah.
Easily overpower Dad.
Yeah. Yeah. And then carrying it all up yourself, that's, I'm 28 years old. So and my dad's 51. So it's a little bit different, but I was thinking of my grandpa would be probably not still, there's another 50 years on top of that, but just thinking of that, sorry, Grandpa, I wouldn't have an issue. So that's kind of where my mind was going with this. Sorry. I know.
No, you're good.
I
No, you're
stole
good.
that.
I think it's a great observation because, again, we see the pictures, the paintings, the drawings, and so we get these presumptions. And I mean, just like with the angels, where I think it's good to know it's like, okay, he's a grown man, he's going willingly, and for us, we getting tied up on the wood, be like, this doesn't seem like this is how it works, Dad.
Yeah.
For him to have the trust and the commitment in his dad's God, because we know later that he's not fully there walking with God yet.
Yeah.
But then we can get into the core of the question: how does Isaac portray Christ to us in this moment?
Well, to me, he's glorifying his father.
Yeah.
I mean, he's willing to do that, and
Yeah.
So
he was willing to sacrifice, which Christ did the same thing.
The ultimate sacrifice. So yeah. I went on a physical, the cross was wood, laying, the plank or the brush. I always pictured it as, your altar, all that, and then you had to put the brush around it to make sure it set flame. So, but laying that upon himself, but also, like what I just said, the ability to trust in your father that what he's doing is the right thing. And, going to one of the commandments of honor your father and mother, we're not, but still that commitment is astounding.
Yeah.
So the line that sticks out to me the most in this story is that when Isaac asks, "What about the sacrifice?" Abraham's default, "The Lord will provide." And of course, looking around, it's like, all right, the Lord can provide any moment now. But the fact that when God stops Abraham, it says he looked up and his eyes, boom, right there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, to our question, how does it portray Christ? Well, if a perfect sacrifice is the only way to free us from sin, the Lord provides. And not only he provides his only begotten Son.
Yeah,
It's
give me the
just
chills,
one of those
honestly.
connections that Christ fulfills everything in the Old Testament. So that's where you'll see a lot of allusions to the Exodus, to Abraham, and whatnot. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to read the entirety of Scripture, because then we can make these connections.
Yeah.
And then some of those things will stick out. The Lord will provide. Well, it doesn't look like it. Well, stick with him, and then at the right moment, the Lord does provide.
And he did.
Yeah.
You got any thoughts?
No,
Okay.
that's, yeah, perfect.
Okay. I feel like I'm doing a lot of extra talking this time. I'm
No,
sorry.
you're
Yeah,
good.
we're enjoying it. It's all right.
Your knowledge is vast, and
Yes.
mine's not so much. So
Well, I mean,
I have
this
opinions,
is
but-
life for me,
Yeah.
and so I do enjoy doing investigate. And as a history dork, it makes it so much more fun for me.
yeah, we're having fun, so we're good.
Good. Number 8. What do you think God might be revealing about himself by denying Esau, the older brother, the position of honor, and assigning it to Jacob, the younger brother, instead?
Big old fat question mark. So,
Well, she
Here
says
you
in
go.
there, and maybe this will prompt a thought. So she says, and we also see explicitly in the New Testament, God is not a respecter of persons. That's the language she uses. So it doesn't matter if you're a
First or
king,
last.
first or last.
Yeah, okay.
There is no special treatment. And for me, I think God uses the younger, and of course, he uses younger regularly in the patriarchs to demonstrate that just because you're the oldest doesn't mean you get everything. Doesn't mean you're the chosen one to receive the blessing. Because if part of what God is doing is to provide evidence that he's in control, not just the social custom, well, then of course he would defy the social custom and deny
okay.
Esau in his pride and arrogance and I would say neglect of his birthright. That again, providing evidence that God is at work. Does that help?
Yes.
All right.
I
And
did.
that's what I kept going to. I don't know, because I hope this doesn't contradict myself what I said earlier, but God's not going to reward a self-serving person, and I think Esau has definitely shown that. Like, he just thinks, hand it all over to me, it's mine, nothing else. And I think this is just another example of, respect me, love me, believe in me, trust me. Well, you're more believing and trusting in yourself, like almost like he's putting himself at a God status over God. Like, I am more important than you, and that's why. So, and that was kind of the thought I was having, and all of that. So.
Yeah. Got any thoughts, lady?
No. No, you said it. I mean, I really didn't. I couldn't wrap my head around it, but that makes sense. I mean, after you said that, because he doesn't choose. I mean, always the least will have the most,
And I think today our cultural norms are way more prevalent than even then. I think we have more of them, let me say that, than what they had then. Theirs were very ingrained in everyday life, but we have cultural norms that we don't even realize we're abiding to, where God is saying, this is what I want, not what your society is telling you should have.
Yeah. And so I guess one of the things to think about too in this whole setup is that the cultural design of the family unit was called the Bet Av, or the father's house. Ancient patriarchy, not the kind of patriarchy that we talk about politically today. So what would happen is that the oldest son would receive like 2/3 of the family estate. The rest of the kids shared the last third. But the thing is, the head of the household, the patriarch, it wasn't necessarily about power, but it was the responsibility to keep the household intact, keep your family free, and keep what you own in the family. So if one of the younger brothers gambled away and lost a piece of the family property, it was his responsibility to go buy it and give it back to the irresponsible brother. If someone got into debt and was, sold into debtor's slavery or debtor's prison, it was his responsibility to redeem. This is where we get redeem, to buy their freedom and get them back into the father's house.
Yeah.
And
I
so-
remember we I don't remember if it was small group or if you talked about it. And
A little bit smaller, but I mentioned it in a couple sermons
Okay,
as well.
yeah.
And that's one of the things to
Yeah,
think
yeah.
about in some of these stories, especially when Abraham goes to get Lot.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham was the head of the household. Lot was his responsibility. He could have been like, nephew, you were being a fool. You deserve what you get. No, it was like, that's my nephew. I'm the head of the household here. He's my responsibility. I'm going to go get him. And so that's one of the things to see in the behavior, even into the New Testament, in the story of the prodigal son. Huge right there.
one of my favorite stories.
But also
honestly.
what Jesus does in redeeming us, because since he is the only begotten son, and since he's considered our big brother, it's his responsibility, as he chooses to, because God chose us to then free us, to buy us back from the debt of sin and death. There's your deep theology for the day.
Put that on a shirt. But no, it's now you say that, it makes,
Yeah.
obviously I heard you say that before, but once you said that, it like clicked. It just, it makes,
And that's what makes the birthright so important and the blessing so important. And then, of course, when God defies the social custom, because, again, providing his evidence. And so when we see these things at work, it's like, oh, my goodness, God, you have totally thought all of this out.
because it's almost like with Jacob, he wanted Jacob to be the head of the household to push them in the right direction versus having, I can't say, Esau, sorry, take them down his direction. I know, sorry, that was just, I had to throw it out there. So, before I lost it. And so, yeah, definitely like just knowing how he wanted that life for us to go. That's mind blowing. Like you just on camera see my mind explode. So
I do have one more fun fact before we finish, but we'll save it for the end.
yeah.
All right. Number 9. Later in Scripture, God begins to refer to himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But at this point in the story, when he's talking with Isaac, he refers to himself as the God of Abraham and Isaac. What does this seem to indicate about God? Is he the God of all people? If not, does that contradict his positions as the one true God, Most High God, or God over all?
I'm going to sound like a broken record here. We just talked about earlier with Isaac how he had not accepted God. It's kind of what I understood what you were, kind of where you were going with that. I think it's when he calls, the God of Isaac and Jacob, and is when you accept him as your God, is kind of where my mind was going with that. Like he claims you as a child, but I am your God when you have the free will to choose me over your earthly.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's Jacob. When it says, God says, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac. So it's Jacob when he has that dream of the ladder. Jacob's response was, awesome, but I need this as evidence. And so there isn't a complete connection yet there. So sorry, I misspoke earlier.
No, you're good. So that's kind of where I think God uses your own decisions. I don't want to say against you, but gives you the ability to have the free will to make that decision on if that's your God or not, and then only claims the people that accepted him. I don't know if that made any sense, but kind of go from there.
So then is he the one true God, Most High God, and God over all?
I would say so, yeah. It's more of, let me say this. Obviously, I'm the free will guy at the end of the day. Like I've brought it up several times. I think he's respecting our free will to not believe in him almost, and, gives you the option to not do the right thing. So with the naming of, I'm as the God of Abraham and Isaac, leaving out Jacob, it's because it seems like, just like what you said, Jacob hasn't, you have to do this for me, give me evidence before almost second guessing him, or that's not probably the right term, but
I would say so for Jacob,
Yeah.
because again, he's received this awesome vision.
Yeah.
And like, oh, great. God speaks. Fantastic. But I need X, Y, and Z. And so I think
Yeah.
for that. So one of the things I want to posit to you guys for this question. So we have the title, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And of course, at the end there, is he the one true God, most high God, God over all? Think of it in terms of this way, comparing God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob versus the other gods. What do you think you can glean from a compare and contrast from what you know in these titles about what we know about God?
Okay. In a lot of other cultures and religions, there's several gods, but it's a god of, like Thor is a god of thunder. You're giving them one specific thing, where our God controls everything. I think that's where
That's part where I'm going.
Starting.
Yeah?
So that kind of.
So in the ancient world, there's God of thunder, the harvest. There was God over cities. So the like Apollos was with the Corinth or Athene or whatever. That was to the extent of the relationship.
So what you needed.
It was over land or sea or air or something. And now we have this Yahweh.
Yeah.
I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so what we see here is that God, who's revealing himself, is not just the God who sits on Mount Olympus or resides in some cave. This is a God who is knowable and can be in relationship with you. So, and that's where I was going. That God is a God of relationship. He's not just in control of thunder or rain or whatever. He's one who wants to walk with you, wants to know you, and wants you to know him. And so the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this title just signifies he's a God who wants to be in relationship. And so does that contradict his position as the other titles? No, because he's also the God who created the heavens and earth, who formed man in his image.
So there's gods. I mean, that God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who oversees everything. Because again, part of the evidence later is that against these other nations, and of course against Egypt later on, is that those are false guys. They can't hold a candle to the one true God, the Most High God, the God over all. And so I think what's actually happening for Abraham in his time is that he's discovered a God who he can be in relationship with.
Yeah.
Not just go to a temple or some type of altar and you throw an incense and you hope Apollo or Athena or Horus, whoever heard you.
Yeah.
This is a God who's speaking to him.
Yeah, with you.
So that's where I was going.
I'm picking up what you're throwing down now.
All right. Smell what I'm cooking.
Yeah.
Smell what I'm stepping in.
Yeah. Whatever you'd like to use.
So any other thoughts since I shared that?
No, it just makes sense. I like the way that comes together.
Yeah. Might have to put that on TikTok or something, throw it out there. That makes way more sense.
There you go.
Someone, if you want to get on
Yeah, if someone wants to start TikTok for the church, by all means. So last question. What is your favorite thing you read about God's character in your God shots from this week?
I wrote down day 14. I'm trying to get there. Wait, maybe I wrote down. Well, we'll talk about it. I just underlined this one. He's not threatened by our questions, but he's also not required to give us any of the answers we are seeking. I guess that wasn't in this week's, but I wrote that down anyways. But and I think that's really powerful for us, just to be able to, again, just move forward with that. We may not always get what we want, but he is there and we have a plan to move forward. So yeah, I definitely, when I was reviewing this back, I went too far back, but I really like that. It really just spoke to me honestly, I just opened the page, and I'm really bad about starting to read in the middle. And I started with that, and I was like, that's what I needed to hear today. Like, so it was really nice.
Mine was day 20. There seems to be a special way God communicates with those in situations that seem less desirable or more impossible. He's endeared to the needy, the lowly, and that's all of us, really. And that is what I love the way he took care of Hagar and Ishmael and Leah. I just feel like we are the lowly, and he continues to favor us and seek us. Yeah. And I appreciate that.
So I had 2 things on day 16. So in the God shot, it's near the end. The king is vowing to take the penalty on himself. And the first couple of weeks he talked, she mentions, and I brought up quite a bit, mercy and grace, and for God to walk himself through the animals to seal the covenant and doesn't require Abraham to do so. It's just a profound act of love, mercy, and grace, knowing that he's going to goof up, knowing that his descendants are going to goof up over and over and over. Yeah. But the thing that actually stuck me the most in what she wrote is there in 16. It's in that first paragraph, right in the middle. He tells Abraham that he's going to bless him so that he may be a blessing. And I think sometimes it's so easy to forget that, because love can be turned inward, just focusing on ourselves or just our family, and we kind of set up these inadvertent shields or barriers with people, to where God has gifted us with gifts of the Holy Spirit to be shared, to be used, not just the people we want, but with everybody. Because if the geographical location of the Holy Land is to impact the world, again, very strategic, then everything Abram is going to be given, and all of his descendants is supposed to be used to impact everybody. And of course, we'll see as they goof it up, and then of course Jesus comes, and then we get the church. Yeah. So, all right. Fun fact. I've been holding this in.
Yeah.
Really simple, nothing crazy about it. So in Genesis chapter 18, Abraham gets up and starts, preparing the meal for the guests. And he, of course, has them cut a choice calf, which would have been hundreds of pounds of meat for 3 guys. Yeah. But there's that. But, it says that there's 3 seahs, or 3 measures of flour he tells Sarah to make. 3 measures, or 3 seahs, depending on your translation, is like 75 pounds of bread. 75 pounds.
I remember you talking about this.
I mentioned it in this sermon, but it just still blows my mind. It's just him and Sarah, and of course the family there. But he's like, I want you to make 75 pounds of bread for these 3 guys. So whatever they eat, they would have up to 25 pounds to take with them on the road. I mean, does bread in the desert last that long? But again, to the core of hospitality as a core virtue. I mean, he was all in, and that's what makes him the archetype Hebrew, and why in Jesus' time, like, we're children of Abraham, and of course you always measured or compared yourself with Abraham, because I mean, he was the start, but also how he exhibited grace, mercy, hospitality. I mean, that there was no one better, really. Yeah.
And he was being a blessing to others.
Yeah.
Right into what you said earlier.
All right. Anything else? Any thoughts, feelings, observations, questions?
It's time to get started again.
Yep. All right. So next week, for those of you who are keeping up with us, I need to turn back one more page here. So next week, we will be in discussion with Genesis chapter 30, and then concluding for that week, Genesis chapter 47. So Genesis 30 to 47. Enjoy. And again, as always, if you got any questions, comments, please put those in the comment box. Please hit that like button, that subscribe button, and look forward to seeing you guys again next week.
Thank you, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Yep. So. See you next week.
See you guys.
God bless.